Here was Classic DM, and I want to get back in the groove here and give you guys an update of what's been going on. So, if you're paying attention, last year we took a trip out west, did a bunch of fun research for taking the Decimation game into the Wild West, and the game's called Outlaws and Lawmen. It's one of my indie small game systems. This one's purely RPG, so this is not a war game like the other games, like Decimation World War II and Kingdoms and Empires. You can play them as a war game, or you can with 12 on 12 skirmishes, or you can play them as a role-playing game. But in this situation, this game is from the very beginning. I'm taking the system, modernized it, has melee combat, all kinds of cool stuff. I want to walk you through the whole book. It's like $5, right? It's not that big of a deal. It's like a 44-page game system. I want to walk you through some of the cool photos from the trip, but not all of them, because I got millions of them. And this trip was out west, was originally planned to be to go see UFC 303 with Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. Now that fell through because Conor McGregor's not really got himself in a good space anymore, and he pulled out of the fight. But the fight was great. We got to see Yuri Prochazka get knocked out by Alex Pereira and a bunch of other fun, great fights. And Michael Venom Page was there. It was really cool. This shot here is from Zion National Park. We stayed and moved around through Vegas, Utah, down to Arizona, Sedona. I went to Tombstone. We went all over the place. And the idea was to mix and match some of the more beautiful outdoor stuff, do lots of horse riding, some trail rides, lots of hiking, not do too much, Vegas stupid shit. All right. But we did some of that too anyway. I'm not going to show you the whole trip. I just want to burn through some photos I thought were pretty cool for guys who like to talk about role-playing games and stuff. This part of the world, this is Zion National Park. It's this massive, beautiful canyon. And at the very end of it is this river. And it's a thing they call the Narrows, which you can hike upstream and this totally slippery bowling ball pebble-covered trail that goes through the slot canyon. And these canyons are carved by water rushing through here as the ice melts. That's like the worst thing in the world. But we found another slot canyon at Canaraville, which is up in Utah, called Canara Falls, which is much better. But these shots are the more early morning. We were going there and took the electric bikes all the way from the parking lot, like 7 or 8 miles, all the way down to the Narrows with our walking sticks and our gear on and shit, and my UFC shirt. This is me. You've never seen what I look like. You've never been to my webpage. Getting up there in age. We went over to Bryce Canyon, did a really, really cool trail ride. There's a mule here. I forgot the mule's name, but he was very cool and super good at balancing on edges and stuff. Did a really long, 3-hour late afternoon trail ride. This isn't real equestrian horsemanship. You've got a trail boss guy who's riding you everything. You're following a path, but it was really cool because when you're inside Bryce Canyon, you have these hoodoos. It's just absolutely beautiful. And this is what it looked like, right? And we were there in July, which is pretty hot. But as you get down to the bottom of the canyons, it gets a lot cooler. Now, I'm not trying to do a National Park Service guide here, even though the people have lost their jobs lately. But I want to give you a snapshot because if you want to run this game, and we're going to go through the rule book here in a few minutes, so all these locations have this really kick-ass history of people hiding out here, buried treasure, all kinds of stuff. So when you see these really beautiful national parks and you see all these elements in modern day, take your kids and go to the park like Clark Griswold. In reality, some of these places have some amazing history. And for me, I collected tons of books and tons of details and maps that I could use for running adventures. Because the whole idea behind doing this game in the first place was, first of all, it helps me graduate the game system from World War II to old martial combat, all the way up into the Wild West. Now we got firearms and brawling and possibly armed combat. And then we, so to take the system where it can handle anything and then ultimately graduate the system into a true D&D clone, and then a far future classic Traveler clone. And that's my long-term plan. And I've been working this thing for a number of years now. This is me again. This is the slot canyon in Canaraville, which is up in Utah, about 2.5 to 3 hours north of Las Vegas. You have to have a permit pass to come here. They only have let X number of people come here a day. This is at the very end. The only way you can continue, if you can see my mouse cursor, you have to climb up these trees that are leaned up against here to go to the last very part of it. Really beautiful. So much better than going to the Narrows. Just go to YouTube and look up a video about the Narrows. You'll see there's 3,000 people and their stinky children going through this massive slot canyon filled with the water, all balancing and holding little poles. It's totally a nightmare. It's like being at Disney World. It sucks. But the beauty, the natural beauty, and the history of this area is really, really amazing. Went down to Sedona, stayed there for a long, long time. Did a lot of horse riding there, a lot of hiking there, a lot of Jeep rides, nighttime sky viewing, all kinds of fun. Of course, eating out and having fun all the time too. I mean, this is the view from the house that we stayed out. And it was really, really cool, really fun, really enjoyed it. Got to see some of the old ruins that are in the area. Went an old train ride through the Verde Canyon. This area is super hot, a lot of history, a lot of mining, right? Because once you start getting south in Arizona and you get towards Tombstone, which is all built on silver, you have a lot of mining happening in this area as well. So we went to Jerome, which is up on top of one of the peaks to the west of Sedona. These ruins, some of these ruins are amazing, absolutely beautiful. This is an old bank, combination bank. I thought it was a cool shot. And of course at Jerome, this massive junkyard they have over there has all these oddities and weird elements. The oldest standing house in the whole region is still kind of barely held up out there. They have all these pistols over the years that they've saved. I thought that was a really cool artistic photograph. In Sedona, there was a little bit more rougher horse riding, much more not beautiful trails and not as Disney, much more lots and lots and lots of stones. My horse fell once when I was riding because there's just so many darn stones everywhere. Pretty rough area, but the horses were, this is them fighting, having fun. It was really, really cool. Really enjoyed. This is me at the Grand Canyon. You can't go to that part of the world without zipping by the Grand Canyon. Boy, is there a lot of history in that area, well, especially with the American Indians and indigenous people. And when you go up north like that, you got to go all the way up into the Indian reservation areas and see the upper and lower canyons that are antelope canyons that are up here. And this is a shot from the inside. This is actually carved out by water. It looks like something like sandstone with the wind would shape this. But these were absolutely beautiful. They're a really controlled tour. There's only a few Indian-based or indigenous people-based tours that do this, but it's definitely worth doing if you have a chance to go there. If you ever do this, make sure you pay attention to the time of day. We planned this perfectly so we could do the upper and the lower antelope canyons and get great shots with the light coming in. If you go there too late, everything's going to be in shadow, excuse me. If you go there too early, it's going to be too bright. So you can see the beams of light and everything, these classic photographs. I took these pictures with my phone, right? And this is better than Bing. So anyway, we're getting to the point here. Beautiful part of the world, fun place to go see, absolutely amazing. I highly recommend, if you ever get a chance to go out west, stay in Sedona, visit Las Vegas for the Las Vegas junk, take a helicopter ride, whatever you want to do. Go up to Utah. So Utah and Arizona, to me, are just really, really stellar. New Mexico was kind of a dump. And if you live in New Mexico, the reason for that is because we were just driving through on the highway. We only got to go through one major city and stay the night, and then we left. Everything else out there was just a no man's land. Wasn't real impressed with New Mexico. Some of the mountains down by Tucson and stuff are really pretty as well. So let's talk about the game, right? Now that we did all this fun research and goofing around out west, I did a play test for 2 months. This is 12 people that I really trust. I know they're from the RPG industry, and some are local. And family members. I really do have family members, moms, dads, sisters, brothers, nieces, because I want the non-RPG gamer to see if they get the system. So the system is as another Decimation system, which is a D100, right? And we are using, traits, which are like ability scores. And we're also using a trait modification table. So why do we use a trait modification table? This is something that they did in Boot Hill, and I liked it back then. When we used to play Top Secret, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, Gamma World. Oh my gosh, there were so many games. TSR came out with so many games. In Boot Hill, it was so lethal. You could die so fast and so quickly. It was off-putting. It was more lethal than Traveler, because Traveler has a lot more Star Trek type action going on, diplomacy and trade and flying around. But when it came to Boot Hill, you needed to have some trait modifications so that your rolls didn't suck. And I've adopted that with this one. So you're going to play either an outlaw or a lawman. Now, what do we mean when we say that, right? So obviously you all know, you hardcore D&D players and Pathfinder players, that there's alignment in all these different types of systems. In the Wild West, where there's not a lot of law going on, there are lawmen of different types, like sheriffs and deputies and marshals and all this kind of stuff. There's the military. You have indigenous people. You have immigrants coming from America from all over the world, because at the Homestead Act of 1862, right during the Civil War, I mean, you're getting a lot of free land if you would just live on it and develop it. Go research the Homestead Act of 1862. I mean, you see these Hollywood versions of this with the Far and Away movie with Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise, but that was a real reason why America moved west. So the game is set after that period. Your character is either a Civil War veteran or an immigrant from that time frame. The reason we picked this time frame from 1865 to 1917 is so we could have proper revolvers and not have the cap and ball mixed bag and muskets. So we could get things like buffalo rifles and lever action rifles and the classic Wild West stuff you see in Hollywood films, right? And that's what everyone always has the whole mythology based on, is the Wild West and the shootouts and all this kind of stuff. So the idea behind the game is that you and the people you're playing with, you're going to pick as yourselves as outlaws and do whatever the devil you want, break the law, rob banks, murder people, cattle rustle, get into fights, gamble, raise hell, whatever you want to do, right? Or you're going to play a lawman and you're tracking down that group. But you aren't playing the game in such a way where like party of three is against party of three, you're sitting at the same table. So the trait modification table ensures that you don't have any crappy rolls. That means you're going to have minimum numbers of 26 and maximum numbers of 100. So this is a D100 system, right? We're not rolling a D20 ever. There's no D20 involved in this at all. And there's lots of D6 dice used for damage. It's a unified damage system like you have in war games like Bolt Action. So the traits. We've seen some of this before, like in World War II Decimation, we use skills. In the Kingdoms and Empires, the version of the Decimation system, which covers like 2,500 years of martial combat, you have traits in that game as well. So we have strength, your measure of physical power, speed, explosiveness, endurance, which actually makes a difference in this game. Your physical cardiovascular conditioning. It determines the lowest possible actual armed combat melee defense you can have before you succumb to incremental exhaustion. If you watch UFC fights or MMA fighting, you know what it's like when someone gasses. This is a rule I put into the game on purpose, not to put you in a situation where your player character is going to suck and be completely defenseless, but as you engage in armed combat, like you're fighting a guy with a hatchet, tomahawk, and you're using a saber and you're a cavalryman, or you're just hand-to-hand fighting, over time, the more you defend, the more it wears you down, the more damage you take, the more you get worn down. You ultimately going to have an end to the fight when your defenses get really low. It's going to become easier for you each other to hit each other. Dexterity. We break dexterity into agility and dexterity. If you've played any of the old school RPG games, you know that, space opera, for example, with millions and millions and millions of statistics, or Gamma World, that a lot of the games just had dexterity. Well, we separate that out, and there's a reason for this. Dexterity is your hand-eye coordination. How well fast you manipulate objects with your hands, especially weapons and firearms. But agility is your full body control and coordination. So a trapeze artist has incredible agility but can be a terrible card trick person. Someone who's amazing at doing a card trick or sleight of hand trick probably can't do the types of things you would see a trapeze artist do, or an acrobat. So those are separated out. Now, when it comes to the mental traits, we have intelligence, but intelligence also is going to include your 5 senses. So it's your aptitude to learn and resolve complex thinking. It doesn't mean that you are a scholar, right? You can have really high intelligence and never gone to any kind of scholarly institute. So in this game, this has an impact on your combat, especially when aiming and shooting and predicting and reacting to things. And lastly, we have resilience. Now, resilience, unlike resilience in World of Warcraft, the arena from 2006, and from the battlegrounds, resilience is really your heart, your inner strength, your control of mind over body, and your tolerance for stress and pain, which is used a lot in what we have situations where you're trying not to be knocked unconscious or knocked prone. It's your way of resisting these effects because you have great resilience. Now, like other parts of the system, we take the traits and we bundle them into little groups, and you can probably figure this out. It's very similar in some ways to D&D 3.0 and 3.5 with reflex and things like that, but it's a little more detailed. We have a physique discipline, which is just the average of strength and endurance. We have a prowess discipline, an average of dexterity and agility, and we have a mental discipline, which is an average of intelligence and resilience. So when we have to make certain types of checks, we can say, oh, give me a physique discipline check, or a prowess discipline check, or a mental discipline check. And we also can do trait checks, like let's just check against your resilience, or let's just check against your intelligence. This is one of the things that we ended up doing. And if you saw my house rules video recently in D&D, we would allow the dungeon master to say to someone, okay, roll your wisdom or less on 4d6, right? And that's going to determine whether your argument to the other people in your party, that they buy it, that they think what you're saying when you're translating some drow scroll really says what it really says, right? So these are ways to do this kind of gameplay without having to have 500 feats and 6,000 skills. Because in my opinion, streamlined gameplay from the classic AD&D OSR era with a few modernizations, is the best and the fastest way to have a lot of fun and a lot of cool adventures. So in addition to having these three disciplines, you end up having a modifier, right? And you end up having a discipline modifier based upon what that is, which is a little similar to what you see in TEML and Pathfinder, but quite different. +2, +4, +6, +8, +10. These are modifiers that will help you. So instead of having a situation where, like, oh, I'm making a gunfighter, I just need hand-eye coordination, I don't need any agility, you'll find situations where you need good statistics, traits in all of these things. Now, just like in our previous game, we have not battle ranks, but renown ranks. Because as you engage in situations of danger and risk, gunfights, shootouts, brawls, cracking a safe, all these things you do that are under duress, that are situations where you might learn something or improve, you count these up as the game master or the referee, and you award them to your players. So if your players do something, like, they've got an example written right here. Let's just pull one out, right? You're a game master, you might want to count 1 to 4 minor encounters as partials, and at the end of maybe like 10-15 minutes of gameplay, it might total up until 1 encounter survived, right? So a chart on the right shows us how many of these you need to rank up, and as you rank up, it gives you a better modifier that applies to everything you do and makes you more lethal and better, even how accurate you're going to be. For example, you can fire a Sharps rifle, which was designed by Christian Sharp in 1848, at a target 1,000 times in your backyard, but firing that gun at an Apache warrior on horseback charging you on the outskirts of Tombstone, or Geronimo coming after you with a spear and hitting that guy in the chest or disabling him has more of an impact on what you learn about shooting under pressure than it did shooting cans in the backyard. And that's the whole idea. Even though Michael Jordan and Curry and these guys shoot millions and millions of free throws, they get really good at it. They also have to go and play in the game and execute it as well, right? So the renown rank increase your lethality over time, which is a reflection of your experience, because in my game systems, you do not get more health. So you are not going from 1d6 health like a thief in level 1 AD&D and being a level 10 thief and having 10d6 as hit points, which could be anything between 6 and 60, right? So we have a fixed health value for all characters in the game because they're all human. We don't have dwarves and elves and all this kind of stuff. So when you're creating a character, it's pretty quick. You choose whether you're going to play an outlaw or lawman, which is usually determined by what your game master wants to run and what you feel like playing. Roll all your traits, D100 6 times, adjust each one by the trait modification table that gives you your final 6 values, assign them to any trait you want, right? And then from there, you can calculate your physique, prowess, and mental disciplines, jot down the discipline modifier, and then start a renown rank between 1 and 3 with a D6. We want you to start off at renown rank 1 to 3, even though it's only a +5 modifier, because your character is not just some wet behind the ears kid, right? You were even in the Civil War, or you were in the military, you're an immigrant, you used to be a boxer, like whatever you used to do, you're not a scrub noob, right? You've been in at least, 5 difficult situations of earning and counter survive points. So that's something that we added to this game that makes it a little bit different than the previous ones. In the previous games, you could start off as a 16-year-old kid and dad hands you a sword. Good luck at the Roman Empire, right? So like the other game, Kingdoms and Empires and the World War II game, we measure time exactly the same way, and we measure distances exactly the same way. We have campaign time, which is anything that's happening that's just described with a sentence. Like riding a stagecoach from Tucson to Phoenix, right? You're not going to sit there for 2.5 days. You're going to just say this in one sentence. Tactical time is where you break everything down into 4-second intervals, not 6 like in D&D, 4-second intervals. That's because those 4 seconds is where you're moving and shooting and defending and reacting like in an action film. You aren't implying that you've been banging on each other with swords for a minute and then finally one shot goes through like in the original AD&D with a 60-second melee round. Or in the modern day, where they just took the melee round and then the segment and graduated the segment up to the melee round, and it just became 6 for some arbitrary reason. We chose 4 on purpose because that gives us a nice divided 15 of these per minute, and it also means we can cover certain amounts of distance based on more reality things like how fast can someone run the 440, etc., like that. So we also have range bands, and then we have point blank, short, medium, long, very long, and extreme, and they're relatively compressed, right? We all know that someone who's amazing with a rifle can shoot a lot further than 150 feet, right? I mean, a football field is 300 feet from goal line to goal line. And our extreme range is half of that. Anything larger than that is half that. Why? Because we're not running across the football, we're trying to shoot someone. And if you've ever gone to a shooting range and done a pistol competition like my father and I used to do, 25 feet and 50 feet's really far away with a pistol and very difficult to hit a target super accurately. And in pistol shoot competitions, where you use special bullets and everything, you are standing there and aiming carefully. You're not under duress. The target's going to shoot you back. So since the game is supporting of 28 millimeter figures, and you can even do it with 172 figures if you really want to. We use the 1 inch square grid equals 5 feet. That's so that every battle map you've ever bought in anything from D&D from 4th edition on already will work for you. So if you have, a bar, if you have one of Dyson Logos' ends, well, there you go. That end will work just fine for you. Or if you got a battle map of an outdoor area with a river crossing, well, guess what? A river crossing works fine. As long as it's not some whack-ass fantasy battle map, all those battle maps you've had in the past will work. And that was a conscious decision a while back. We have different movement distances and how fast you can move within a tactical turn. Silent movement, which is like stealth movement, walk, advance, charge, crouch, run, and sprint. These things are important in firearm combat. Unlike bolt action, where you just need these numbers to hit, and it doesn't matter how far away they are, as long as it's not further than 25 inches, etc. Or like in D&D, where there's not a lot of rules that take into consideration the distance and the range of shots that someone takes to keep the game moving fast, because there's so many feats and so many skills and so many spells. They don't have the time for the archer in Pathfinder or D&D to determine whether they're 50 to 100 feet away or 50 feet away. If you've ever shot a bow or a black powder weapon or a lever action rifle or a shotgun or a pistol or anything else like I have in my life, distance makes a huge difference when you're trying to do it quickly and when you do it really slow. So movement affects whether you can hit your target, and when you're moving yourself, how far you can move. Sounds pretty straightforward, doesn't it? So we have a system like you probably picked up with us earlier called actions and checks. So if you want to do anything, because players can come up with millions and millions and millions of ideas of things they want to do, right? You don't have to rely on looking at a bunch of athletics feats and figure out which one works for you and why it has a special bonus. And the referee doesn't have to memorize all these, bloated entries in these player handbooks. Instead, the players just say what they want to do. And you have ways as a game master to resolve that. And the way we do this is you can have anything that has an applicable base chance of success or measurable level of difficulty, right? That's an action difficulty check. You refer to this. You determine yourself as the referee, not the player telling you what they're doing. Not the player telling you which feat they're using or which skill they want or trying to control the game. You decide as the game master, like, hey, you know what? If you're gonna jump out of a second story window, right? If the glass hasn't been broken, and land on the little shed roof above and roll and land on the ground without breaking your ankle, I'm gonna call that freaking challenging. You got a 20% chance of success, right? Now the character's renown rank and a modifier will apply to your benefit. That means it increases the success chance of that check. So as your character grows, what will, maybe it was 20% chance base, your renown rank 3, it's now a 25% chance. So you add those modifiers to the target number. This applies throughout the entire game system. Easy thing to remember. Anytime there's a modifier, it applies to the target number. You don't ever roll the dice and then change the dice number. You just change the target number. So also, as you've probably figured already, you can do a trait check like we talked about earlier, or a discipline check. For example, here's an example. Old Bill, renown rank 5, trying to break into James McIntosh's plantation home. Outside the locked door, the player says he wants to try and force the door, but he doesn't want to blatantly kick it down. The game master says, hey, this is a simple trait check for your strength, as opposed to maybe a physique discipline check. So Old Bill has traits of 67 strength, 89 endurance, 33 dexterity, 69 agility, 96 resilience, and 77 intelligence. So he has a physique discipline 78, prowess discipline 51, mental discipline is 87. This is all pre-calculated on your character sheet. He only needs to roll his strength or less on a D100, and there's two 10-sided dice. So if he rolls a 77, he fails. He can try again, rolls a 21, door pops open. Now the referee has created a situation where the dice are mitigating. The odds of Old Bill doing these things are based on that character's statistics, right? Not what level they are, right? Not what race they are, just their innate statistical values. Maybe he made some noise, maybe he didn't, but it's a good enough, quick, simple enough system for you to do almost anything. So I really love the system. It works really, really fast on the battlefield when something's happening and players are like, what would I do? And when you're playing a game that's about the Wild West and you've seen lots of films about it, you have all kinds of crazy things you want your character to do that you would never do in real life, like jump off of a speeding train or jump from one horse to another horse. This gives you a way to determine these things as the referee. Now, combat is the same that we've had in the past, but there's a lot of modifiers that have changed, especially when it comes to the firearm combat. Now, I'm just going to go through this conceptually because I know I'm probably getting into the weeds a little too much here. But conceptually, every time a combat happens, right, we don't ever check for surprise. What we do is everyone's, you see these two guys over here, these cattle rustlers, you're a lawman by yourself, they're at the campfire, you come walking up to them, they see you, you see them, and then each side has to make an action call. An action call is saying what you're going to do because you guys are doing this stuff simultaneously. Like one guy would say, I'm going to grab my I'm going to grab my fast draw revolver out of my bag. The guy says, I'm going to run to the horse and grab my lever action rifle. And then maybe the lawman says, I'm going to pull my pistol on both of them and tell them to stop. So they call their action, and then we all check to see how fast everyone is, which is called speed. And guess what? Speed is prowess discipline, right? Remember, which was agility and dexterity. They had the average of the two values, plus your renown rank. So the more experienced you are, your target number is going to get higher. And you add these two things together. So you roll a D100 and add your speed. So say I rolled a 40 and my prowess is, well, here we got an example right here. Old Bill, he rolls a 72 plus 51 plus 5 gives him a 128. The game master rolled for Sam in this situation where he's breaking into the library and Sam sees him. He rolls a 22 plus a 78 plus a 10 is 110. So Old Bill wins the first action roll, but his called action he must now execute on. He can't change his mind. So it's not a real difficult thing to do. Well, here's why we did the rules this way. If you ever played Baldur's Gate 3 or Icewind Dale or any of the Divinity Original Sin games, and all the Larian games, for example, when those games suffer from death slog combat, when there's like 12 goblins on screen and 6 players on screen, and they have these cards, they rotate, and they roll for initiative. It goes, shink, everyone's stuck in combat, everyone's motionless, and it sets this initiative order for 35 different characters on screen. First of all, that's too much to manage in a real life situation, at the table. You usually only want like 8 on 8, the worst case. Having an initiative order determined once and only once is unfair because you are someone who is able to react along the way every time someone tries to do an action. This is why when you watch two guys boxing, not one guy lands the first punch and then continues to land the first punch for the rest of the fight, and another guy never lands a punch. It's two people competing with each other. In the tide turns, your positioning, what you're moving, all this needs to be based, statistically on your human abilities, and they're going to determine a little bit of luck in there. So the modifiers aren't massive. You still got this wild D100 number, but sometimes all you need is 5 more points on something and you're going to get to go first. And sometimes that might mean the difference between life and death. So it's scarier, but it's not a situation where once you're locked in, you're screwed. And that's something about Baldur's Gate 3 I hate. I think it's absolutely terrible. The initiative order in D&D, and they're using 5e, so what do you expect, is nasty, and it just doesn't allow anyone to circumvent the situation and doesn't take any advantage of people's ability scores and how fast they might actually really be. All right, I'm preaching a little bit here. So in a tactical turn, you can do all kinds of actions. You could say, hey, I'm waiting. If that means I get plus 50 to my first action roll. I want to change my stance. I want to crouch. I want to kneel prone, stand up from being knocked down. You want to move. You want to bandage some wounds. You can engage in hand-to-hand attack if you're a certain distance away from someone. If you got a weapon, you could strike, bludgeon, grab, throw, defend. You could, if you got an armed weapon, you could try to hit someone with a weapon, a sword, hatchet, a knife. Fire a firearm, point and shoot the firearm from your hip, from the chest, fast sighting, aim down the sight, control breathing, and sniping. I mean, all these are different ways for you to execute the action instead of saying, I attack, right? You ever notice that about when you're playing D&D 5th edition, AD&D, and some other games? It's just like, multiple attack penalty and Pathfinder is like, I just attack with my sword. I don't really have any way to describe anything different than this, right? So you can use ranged attack, which could be a martial weapon, like a bow, spear, a tomahawk, or a knife. Reload your pistol, reload a weapon, change to another weapon, or do a disrupt attack, which is very similar to an attack of opportunity. You could use your hands. You could take a one step to reposition yourself so you're not being flanked. And these are all described for you in detail. So I want to talk very briefly about hand-to-hand fighting and disrupt attacks. If someone tries to move past you, right, an adjacent 5-foot square and doesn't say they want to defensively pass you. Anytime an enemy or character moves within 5 feet or attempts to pass by a stationary combatant but is not attacking that stationary combatant, it presents an opportunity for the stationary combatant to perform a disrupt attack. It's not a regular attack. You're not just shooting someone with your gun. A disrupt attack is one of the type of, it's kind of like a hand-to-hand attack. It's a pummel, a punch, a kick, a trip, a grab, a push, or a slam. It's not taking your double-barrel shotgun and getting a free shot when you just fired your double-barrel shotgun, 4 seconds ago. So it really means for someone's running past you, you can interfere with their movement and you can engage with them. And if that person does not actively defend, it becomes almost a guaranteed win for you to disrupt their attack and to disrupt their movement. That also ties into hand-to-hand combat. In armed combat, we look at things, we have a melee base to hit target. So a combatant 1, combatant 2. Combatant 1, they have a percentage chance that they can strike a target, another person, and they have a percentage chance that carries with them wherever they go. That's their defense. And so what happens at the table, you have opposing roles. Opposing roles is something I think is so much more fun than rolling against an armor class number, which has absolutely nothing to do in any way, shape, or form about someone's defenses. It's the same thing in Traveler. When you're rolling to hit against a number that doesn't make any sense, someone wearing ablet armor versus power armor, it's suddenly harder to hit them. The reason why this is because these games, from the time frame they were created, don't have damage mitigation, right? They have long combat sequences of 15 seconds like in Traveler, or a whole minute like in AD&D. They don't go down to the gritty detail to figure out, where did you get hit? Oh, I got hit in the left shoulder. Well, you're wearing these Roman pauldrons, and that's why it's going to protect you. So because they don't do that kind of detail, no one ever has combat rolls based on what would really be like, which is my defenses and my attack abilities versus yours, right? And that's in armed combat, and we saw this in Kingdoms and Empire. It's very cool to fight this way. It's very fast, back and forth, and when the attacks happen, right, the result of me trying to hit you and you trying to defend, and then you trying to hit me and me trying to defend, based on what the action roll is, that result is one of 4 things. If you rolled, say you're the attacker and I'm the defender. If you rolled to attack and you got a yes, and I rolled to defend it, I got a yes. I defended your attack, I don't take any damage. We go back to the first action roll. However, because I defended your attack and you successfully would have hit me, if my defenses weren't there, I lose 5% of my melee defense for the next attack. And this effect can't go below your endurance divided by 5. So say you had 50 endurance, that means divided by 5 give you 10. Mine, it will never go down to 10. But because this goes down lower and lower, your melee defense decreases. Let's say you attacked and you didn't successfully attack, and I defended. I gain momentum. That means I can immediately start attacking, and we can skip the first action roll. So it's almost like having an opportunity to parry or riposte against someone in armed melee combat. Let's say you successfully attack and I don't successfully defend. That means you've hit me. Let's determine where you hit me with a hit location and the kind of wound severity, right? Which takes into account your weapon and things like that. And you get to retain the momentum because you damaged me. We call it, and if you look at Diablo and a bunch of other games, we call it a get hit animation, or a little stagger that happens. It's horrible in Path of Exile too. This reduces the melee defenders by 20% until momentum is lost. So once you nail someone with an armed melee attack, and if you can do it once, twice, 3 times in a row, you can really beat the shit out of somebody. However, I have found that at the table that rarely happens, but when it does happen, it feels like critting 3 times in a row. It's really amazing. Now let's say you try to attack me and you didn't succeed against your melee attack, and I didn't succeed in my defense roll. Everything fails. Let's go back to the first action. So momentum is really interesting. It's really fun. It's so different because the attackers and the defenders are rolling at the same time. They've got a target number that's on their character sheet. I got to get a 74 or less. I got to get a 74 or less. As you play, you start to memorize inherently what it takes to hit certain targets, and you shift targets to someone that's easier to hit. It's really interesting how players play that at the table. They're like, oh, wow, okay, this guy's melee defense sucks. Let's go after him and get rid of him quicker and then go back and kill this guy. Because these are people, right? They're human beings. They're not hill giants that all have AC 7. So it's really cool, very fast paced, very fun. I think you'd love it if you try it out. It looks complicated, but when you're actually playing it, it's very fast. And there's lots of cool tactical things you can do. Now let's talk about range combat. Throwing a spear, throwing a tomahawk, throwing a throwing knife, firing a bow. There's no crossbows in the Wild West, but firing a bow, these things are hard to do. They are very hard to do. If you're using a longbow or a composite bow, not one with pulleys on it, and you try to hit a target, right, it's hard to do. And even though the indigenous people and American Indians were extremely good at using bows, I decided we made the game that we're not going to have any kind of racial or cultural bonuses for anyone. All men are created equal. Now, we know that if you lived in a society where you were throwing hatchets or launching spears at people, and that's how you hunted and killed buffalo or using a bow, you would be a lot better at it. If that was a situation, if you want to create, someone wants to create an indigenous character, an Apache Indian, then you can add statistics to those characters to boost it. But by the book, I decided not to have any kind of favoritism. How do we know that an Indian guy was awesome with a bow versus another guy? How can we know a guy who's immigrated from Germany is better with a pistol? It doesn't seem to make sense. Let's let the dice determine how that man or that woman is. Right. So the range base to hit number, which is your target number to hit someone, is only 20% plus your renown rank and 8 modifier. So when you're starting off, it's only like 25% chance to hit. But what happens is the range has bonuses, so the target number goes up. So for example, at short range, you get plus 40 because it's not hard to hit something at short range. Plus 40 plus your 25, you're talking about 65% chance to hit somebody. So this is something that came from the World War II version of the game system. You have a base number. It's not super high, but the type of weapon you use is designed and suited, works better at different distances, right? And some distances, completely ineffective. Now, let's go into gunfights. Firearm combat is very cool. We take into consideration, we create a firearm base to hit number just for you, right? There is no defense against firearms. You can't dodge, you can't block. There's no defensive roll. The two rolls will happen at the same time. The opposing roll things only happens in hand-to-hand. It only happens in armed melee. Armed melee means you got a weapon in your hand, not a pistol. So you take your dexterity and your intelligence, add it together, divided by 4, right? Then you add your renown rank modifier, and then there's a firearm accuracy modifier based on the kind of weapon you're using, whether it's a shotgun or lever action rifle. And those values change over distance. So on your character sheet, you'll see the example at the end of the book here. We pre-calculate all this stuff. So I'm going to shoot my lever action. This guy over here, he's 75 feet away. It's this distance. I've got on my character sheet. It looks like my base number is going to be 74% chance to hit him. And what's this guy doing? He's always crouch runs. Let's take this much off the number. Boom. That's it. So the situation, the actions of what you're doing at the table can modify your chance to hit, reduce your chance to hit. Because some of the only defenses against firearm combat is just getting the hell out of the way and get to cover and move, right? So that's what we use to determine your firearm base to hit. Now, there's so many different guns and weapons in the world. It's not fair to break them all down by, a Navy issued Colt versus a Army issued version of the Colt. That might be a real firearm nut. We'll see the differences here, but we just put the weapons in large categories: Derringer, revolver, sawed-off shotgun, a hunting shotgun, which is not sawed-off, it's a longer barrel, a lever-action rifle, and then a single-shot buffalo rifle, right? And if you want to use range, you can use it for 28 millimeter or 172. This 172 is just twice as much, right? So the last thing that affects your firearm combat is what's your stance? How are you standing? And there's not really a lot of crazy options here. If you're standing, there's no modifier. But if you're kneeling down on one knee and brace, you get plus 15 to your chance to hit. If you're prone or braced, laying on the ground, you get a little bit of bonus there too. But if you're moving and you're the shooter, you can't shoot while crouch running. But you can be walking forward and shooting, like you see in the Tombstone movies, where guys are walking forward, blasting away at OK Corral. If you're moving silently, you're not moving very quickly. It's very steady. If you're advancing, coming forward relatively quickly and shooting, it's harder to keep your balance and keep your aim level while you're moving relatively quickly, because it's almost like a light jog or a trot. So we do have a lot of modifiers. When you look at all the tables in the rule book, it's not as bad as Space Opera. There are a few in there, but when you're at the table, you're only looking for 1 or 2 of them and you're ready to go and get the target number. And usually the range doesn't change that much. And so these are some of the things I think that make firearm combat interesting. As someone being fired upon, how far away you are and how you're moving is tremendous benefit. And doesn't that make sense? Of course it makes sense. The further away you are, you're harder to hit. If you're moving in and out of cover and running, you're a harder target to hit. That's what you want to have happen. Now, firearms aren't quite as lethal as they are in Boot Hill, but they can be, depending on what happens. So we have some penalties in here for if the cover as well. It's real simple. It's like minus 75 for full cover, minus 50, minus 25, etc. Very simple. We made that much more streamlined than we had in Decimation. There's also, if you're shooting from horse or all those weapons, they have a modifier. If you're riding a horse and you're galloping along, if you're a walk, trot, or gallop, you're going to have modifiers to your chance to hit, right? So this is something you might want to think about when you're playing a game. Because you never know. I'm on a stagecoach and I'm riding, I'll use my sawed-off shotgun and blast this guy trying to point a pistol at me. And the stagecoach is galloping. I mean, you're using a sawed-off shotgun, it's like minus 95% chance to hit. But then again, remember your base chance to hit at that almost short range, you might have a 45% chance to hit. So if you get anything from 0-1 to 0-5, it's always a hit. And anything from 95 to 100 is always a miss. Okay, hit location. This system has grown a lot. I'm really proud of it. I love it. It's so fun for man versus man, human versus human, girl versus girl, whatever you want to call it, fighting. Hit location. High numbers are better. So there's an accuracy bonus for certain types of attacks, certain types of weapons, right? That will boost this chance of hitting. But when you have scored a hit on someone, you need to determine where they got hit. Now, there's no damage mitigation in the Wild West. There is in Kingdoms and Empires where they're wearing chainmail, split mail, plate mail, etc. But where you get hit is going to have an impact on how severe the wound will ultimately be. So unlike in D&D, we're like, oh, it's a dagger, 1d4. Doesn't matter where you hit someone, eyeball or pinky, it's 1d4, right? Doesn't make any damn sense. So in this game where hit location matters, hitting someone in the abdomen versus the neck has a huge difference. So once you score the hit and you figure out where it is with a 50-50 chance for symmetry, like our feet, hands, biceps, lower legs, etc., then we roll on a severity table, and that's where the damage dice come into play. Let's give you an example. Let's say we rolled a hit and we hit a 53. So you look in the chart, a 53 is in the upper leg. Let's say a 50-50 chance, it got hit in the left leg, right? The upper part of the leg where your thigh is. There's no severity modifier for that. So there's no additional number. So now we're going to roll just on the wound severity table. Now, it innately gets modified by your renown rank innate modifier. So if you're renown rank 6 or 7, this is going to boost this base roll really, really well. Let's roll, say you roll an 84 for the wound severity, right? That's a serious wound. It may be temporarily disorient you. It's 4d damage, which is 4d6. Every damage dice is a d6 number. So when you roll the d6, 4 of them, it could be 16 or it could just be 4. Somewhere in the middle there, you know? That's not enough because everyone has what's called a base threshold of 30 wound points. The 30 wound points is interesting. It's not if you get hit up to 30 and then you die, right? It's a series of thresholds. So when you get hit multiple times, like bullets, knives, arrows, whatever it is, no matter where it is, the D6 number is how severe it is, right? So let's say you got hit that 4D roll. Say we roll 3 and a 3, a 3 and a 1. So that's 10. Well, anything above 10, it doesn't have any impairment on you. It's a wound. You can still function. You may not even notice until the adrenaline fades. And that's a third of your life, you would think, if you only had 30 wound points. But they aren't big enough numbers to debilitate you where you can't do anything. However, the moment you go over 20, you can become disoriented. You have to make a resilience check to ignore yourself becoming disoriented. So cumulative damage creates thresholds. So over the course of a gunfight or a brawl, once you get over 30, things can go bad real quickly. If you're super resilient, you might be able to just tough through it and maybe live, because there's no healers in the Wild West. Healing wounds are going to require you resting up and bandaging and keep those wounds clean. It might take you days or weeks in bed rest to heal up from wounds. But the grittiness of the wound threshold system is really, really cool, because when someone rolls a bunch of 6s, those things are devastating, right? Very, very nasty. You could get shot right in the face with a devastating 6D wound, but by the time you roll all those dice, the number could be only 12. And hey, it just hit you in the face. There's people who've been shot in the face, go through the side of the cheek, come out behind their ear. If they don't die, it's a devastating wound. It could, an inch to the left, and there goes the sinus cavity. It can be really nasty. So this is a really cool system, because when it comes time to roll the hit location and then the damage dice, everyone's watching. So everyone's like, oh, because it's not this like, well, that's no big deal because Billy's only a rogue and he's using a dagger and he only does 1d4 damage, so he's certainly not going to kill the frost giant this melee round. There's no sense of anticipation of what the hell's going to happen next. So by having such nasty possibilities take place, the tension on the table becomes quite high. So when there's a fear of death and everyone's watching what's happening, they're hoping and praying that they cannot be over-targeted and have multiple people shoot them at once. So guess what you do? You move, you get to cover. It's almost hilarious how people were defensively shooting and waiting for someone else to expose themselves and then shooting at them, then getting back behind cover like you would do in a real gunfight, right? Very cool, very fun system. Some of the bad things that can happen, you can become disoriented, you can become dazed, you can get knocked down the ground, you can be knocked unconscious, and there's rules in here in the whole book to tell you how to deal with all that kind of stuff. So, target awareness, flanking. This is something that's been a big debate between me and the Pathfinder players. I can't stand the way Pathfinder 2nd Edition handles flanking. They're a better game design company than I ever will be. I'm just an independent guy making my own crap, right? So Paizo's awesome. I don't have anything against them, but I don't like their flanking rules. And I like the flanking rules in D&D, but I want more detail than that. I want it a little more interesting than this. I want to work with this game system besides just no shield, no dex bonus, because no shield, no dex bonus isn't detailed enough. Here's how it works here. If someone is flanked and aware, they can use the one step to change their position so they're no longer flanked. That's actively defending. If you're behind someone and they don't even know you're there, right? You're unaware or you're sleeping, you're completely defenseless. Now, these have big bonuses. That's why people try to sneak up on people, right? That's what you might be sneak up on someone and they hear you and they're actively aware and they turn around trying to defend themselves. And when that person turns his back, someone else might shoot you, right? Or stab you. So in melee combat, just look at any fight scene in Gladiator or Braveheart or any Punch Out. There's always someone coming up from behind with a chair to nail someone over the top of the head. So how does this affect combat? If someone's not actively defending, but they're aware, like I'm not actively going to defend against you trying to hit me with the chair because I'm going to finish this guy and beating the shit out of. The to hit bonus for the melee attack is 25%. The accuracy bonus is plus 15. If I'm completely flanked, right, like completely from behind, but I'm not actively defending from you or anything, it's 50% bonus to hit, right? And the accuracy bonus, which increases the hit location, is 20%. If someone's defenseless, it's plus 100% and plus 50% on the damage dice. You could still try and kill someone who's asleep and not do it in the first attempt. I mean, not that I've tried that. Yeah. I've just seen pictures on TV. But in all seriousness, you know, these rules make more sense. You're shooting someone who's unaware of your presence. Your chance to hit them is much better. You get the extra millisecond of aiming. That's why we have those kind of rules in place. We don't have situations where you need to have someone else in your party draw a diagonal through the target, and then you both are attacking at the same time, which creates a situation where the defender can't defend against both you, so therefore they're flanked no matter who's fighting them. And that doesn't make any sense. I understand the theme of the Paizo rule. I just don't think it's detailed enough. Flanking someone does not require another person to be involved in a combat. That's the way I look at it. Okay, we're almost done here. You're running a combat situation. The opening tactical turn. Everyone calls out their intended action. They make an action call. You say what you're going to do. When there's a lot of people on the battlefield or in the bar or wherever it is out west in a canyon, you start with the characters in the front, the bad guys and the good guys, the ones controlled by the game master and you work your ways backwards. Now, the only reason to do that is to declare the actions. The people that are closer to each other are the ones that are going to get a chance to react first. That's why they can say, I'm going to move back. I'm going to draw my pistol and shoot the guy right in front of me. I'm going to take my double barrel shotgun and swing it wide and try to hit both those guys at the same time. That's the kind of things that people in the front are going to probably do. It also allows the people that see that you're swinging around and want to use your shotgun, the person directly behind you might be like, I'm going to duck behind the bar and pull out my pistol and wait to shoot when there's an opportunity, which is an action. So once we made the action call, we then roll the first action roll. Remember, we had that D100, we add our speed, and that gives us the numbers we jot down on, post-it notes real quickly. Okay, you get to go first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Now, firearm combats immediately fire their weapons. We resolve any hit locations for successful firearm shots. We resolve any wounds for any successful firearm shots. We have to track each wound separately as a separate entry. Like I hit for 6 points, 11 points, 7 points, and 3 points. It's being hit for 24 in one hit is more devastating than being hit for 24 with 6 fours. It's the way it works. It's very, very different. So you then do any resilient trait checks or wound threshold effects. If someone's going to be knocked down or unconscious, they might be able to resist this. People that are within 5 feet with it are susceptible to disrupt attacks. If anyone tries moving past someone, you have to resolve those immediately. Melee hand-to-hand combatants can attack and defend simultaneously. For example, let's say we're in a bar. These two guys come in the front door. I turn. He sees me. I see him. He's pointing a pistol at me. I want to try to grab a pistol and punch him in the face and knock him unconscious because I can't get my gun out in time because he already has his gun drawn. And maybe my speed roll is fast enough to do that action. Maybe I decide I want to knock him down. Maybe I think that I can do this really quickly. Maybe it's too close for me to shoot, etc. So the melee and hand-to-hand combat's attack and defense simultaneously. We notate who gets the momentum. We resolve any hit location from successful armed melee attacks, ensuring we apply the accuracy bonuses, because weapons, like a hatchet versus a knife, they have different accuracy bonuses. Then we resolve all that wound severity. Then we track each wound as a separate entry. We make resilient trait checks for those wounds, and then we move to the next turn. In the next turn, ranged attacks fire. So in that first turn, say you're going to shoot a bow, there's a guy's gunfighting out in the field, and you got a bow, and you're an Apache Indian, or maybe you're just a guy who picked up a bow and is going to shoot it, or you're going to throw a hatchet or something. You're aiming and pulling that bow back, and you don't release the arrow to the end of the first tactical turn. That's one disadvantage of using ranged weapons. The amount of time it takes to point and shoot, literally, or throw, or toss, or fire, is longer because it requires holding out the physicality of aiming. So anyone who has decided to evade, who knows you're being attacked by that, you have that modifier, and then you roll their hit location. Then you go right back to doing everything you did in the other round. And that's how it works. Ranged attacks go off at the beginning of the second tactical turn. Every other tactical turn, they go first. That's basically how it works. And once you get the flow of playing that way, it's not that big of a deal. And just like in Kingdoms and Empires, we have advanced rules for melee weapons. Knives, you have modifiers to their speed, right? Your melee defense, your accuracy. Remember, accuracy affects your hit location. They have special abilities you can do, like stab or slash someone. It's the same thing with swords and sabers, hatchets and tomahawks, and spears. They all have like little innate things you can do with them. They're not tremendously crazy, but they're cool enough to make you decide which one's the best for you. For example, let's say you use a hatch or a tomahawk. Like the club, which graduated to the mace, the basic axe used for chopping trees graduated to from a domestic tool to being a lethal weapon in warfare. Sharpened axe heads are ideal for cleaving with force, almost as powerful as swords, while not sacrificing the speed. Like a mace, however, mace make terrible defensive weapons for parrying incoming blows. The wielder completely has to rely on their ability to evade. So, speed modifier, 20 plus 20 to your speed. Remember, you roll a d100 to add your speed number. So you're gonna be faster with that weapon. Your melee defense modifier, you don't have as good a defense. Your core melee defense number is lower. Your accuracy bonus is higher. Strikes do an additional 1d damage of cleaving damage. On a natural 6, additional cleaving damage roll, if it strikes the foot, hand, forearm, or bicep, the extremity can be severed. The target must make a resilient trait check or have their melee-based defense reduced by 35%. So, I mean, these are the kinds of things you see in films, right? That's society. Whoa, lop this guy's arm off. So those kind of things are gritty, interesting, and when you get into armed melee combat, things can go crazy real quickly. All right, building a character, pretty straightforward. Roll up the ability scores, pre-calculate the prowess discipline, note the prowess discipline modifiers, note the renown rank innate modifier, whatever level you start at, pre-calculate speed, pre-calculate your disrupt and hand-to-hand attack / defense, which is the same number, pre-calculate your melee base to hit, melee defense, your range base to hit, and your firearm base to hit. Now pre-calculate by the weapon. Let's say for this character here, they have a revolver and a lever action rifle. We look up the revolver fire accuracy modifiers in the FAM table, and then for the Colt single action revolver, we now have target numbers. If I'm going to shoot my Colt action single arm revolver at someone at medium range, 53% chance to hit base. That can be modified by the target's movement, my own movement. If I'm standing still and bracing, I get a better chance to hit. Same thing with the Winchester model 1873. Pretty straightforward. You can download the character sheets on my website. It gives you spots to write all these data, all this information down. Really cool, really fun. I really enjoyed doing this. I love this system. It's come so far from the very beginning. It's so much faster now than I ever thought it was going to be. Last shout out to Wesley Gardner. He's a game industry digital artist, a fantastic digital painter. He's the gentleman that did the cover art for me. It was worth every penny. I paid him for it. I loved it. He did the artwork on his own volition for fun in January of 2024. I said, dude, this has got to be the cover for my next game. I love it. So shout out to him and check out his profile of all his work. All right, let's wrap it up. Long video, lots of talking, lots of details, almost an hour long. But I wanted someone who was really interested in how this cool system is coming along to hear it from me as to why some of these decisions were made and how the playtest turned out. It was really fun. I actually changed some of the firearm stuff because it was too powerful. Firearms became so powerful. Everyone's nailing each other all the time and people were getting blown away. So we dropped that down a little bit, made it a little more gritty, a little more based on range as opposed to being automatically nailing everyone all the time. So it's really fun. I've had a great time doing it. I do have plans to do more. I started after Christmas working on an OSRIC update for the year 1900. I'll talk about that in a different video, but I just love this Decimation. Please come by and support me, get a copy of it, give me your signs and feedback. If you want adventures for this thing, you got to let me know. The next plan is take this to science fiction, take this into a D&D world with spells and magic, and I'm just going to keep graduating the system so it becomes awesome and popular and people play around the world. And that's the whole idea. Cool. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I know it's been almost a whole hour, but lots to go over, lots of exciting stuff to go over. Hope you had fun to look at the photos from the trip out west too. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.